Implementing equality is a bit different for reference types than for value types. For reference types, you have to deal with inheritance. That isn't an issue for value types because all value types are automatically sealed. That means our demo is going to be a bit more complicated than the code in the previous module, so let's start by setting up the demo, which means putting in place the classes that we'll implement equality for. First up, we have a class called food. Here's the basic code for it. I'm starting it off exactly the same way as the food item struct of the last module, with basically the same fields, a string representing the name of the food, and an enum for the food group. And there's the usual constructor, and a toString method that just displays the name of the food. It's the same as the food item struct, except that this is a reference type. Now I want to show you how equality works with inheritance, so I'm also going to assume that this is a base class, and that there'll be derived classes representing more specific food information. In particular, for this example, if I show you this window, you can see that I also have a class called cooked food, which is derived from food. Cooked food has an additional field, a string that tells you how the food was cooked. And you can see the constructor has the additional parameter, and for cooked food, toString concatenates the cooking method and the name. One other thing about cooked food, I've made it a sealed class, so I'm declaring that nothing else will ever derive from it. That's important because being sealed affects how you can implement equality. And if we go to the main method, I've instantiated two variables, a food that represents an ordinary uncooked apple, and a derived type cooked food instance that represents stewed apple. There are two console.write lines to display them, so if I run that, we should see the apple and the stewed apple displayed. That works fine. Now, before I start showing you how to add equality to these types, let's just paste in some additional code to remind ourselves how .NET's default equality will fare up. First up, a helper method. This method, called displayWhetherEqual, takes two food instances, uses the equality operator to compare them, and displays an appropriate message to say whether they are equal or not. Now back to the main method, and I'll add three new variables. An extra cooked food instance representing baked apple, and there are two more variables which are basically copies of stewed apple and apple. And then I test out various pairings of these to see if they are equal using our displayWhetherEqual helper method. If we run that now, we would expect every one of these comparisons to return false, except for the final one in which we are comparing the apple variable with itself. That's because we haven't yet implemented equality, which means that C# will use reference semantics. So let's run that to check. And yes, you can see everything except the final test has come out showing not equal. If I'd used the objects.equals method instead of the equality operator, I'd have got the same results. And notice how, unlike for value types, I can immediately use the equality operator on these two reference types, even without adding any equality-related code to them.